Good morning. Last week we started the area of the discussion, which is taxation, tax liability, right? So now we know. If I go with the previous discussion, last week we have this chargeability of a non-resident person. So in charges section, you remember, charges section we discussed who is liable for Sri Lanka income, right? Who is liable for Sri Lanka income tax? Person who has a taxable income or who receives final withholding payment. There we can discuss what is the residential district of the person. The person. It could be resident person or it could be non-resident person. Whoever person, that person should be, I mean, the discuss who are the coming under the definition of person. Whoever person is irrespective of their residence. If he has a taxable income or he receives final withholding payment, he is chargeable for Sri Lanka. So having said that, it's discussed what is final withholding payment, what is taxable income. So when we are discussing the taxable income, it's mentioned the taxable income says taxable income is equal to taxable income if there is no deduction under section 52. That says taxable income says taxable income from employment, taxable income from business, taxable income from investment, taxable income from other sources. Having said that, they discuss and the section both discuss residential estates. It says in case of the resident person, wherever the source arises, further income is generated. It is not material. In case of the resident person, right? But in case of the non-resident person, it says to the extent that income arises from employment, business, investment, or other sources, where there should be a source in Sri Lanka. There should be a source in Sri Lanka. So therefore, in case of a non-resident person, it is very important that we need to establish there is a source in Sri Lanka. Derived or arising from a source in Sri Lanka. That particular income. It could be from employment, it could be from business, it could be from investment or any other source. But income should be derived or arise from a source in Sri Lanka. That means that particular income should be generated from Sri Lanka. Unless he doesn't have liability for Sri Lanka income. It's very clear, right? We know that under section 69 also we discuss how to determine the residential status. So if we go with the layman, residential status means a person who is not in Sri Lanka. It is very, very fair. If he doesn't have any income in Sri Lanka, he is not liable for Sri Lanka tax. But residential estate doesn't talk about the person physically present or not. It is not material. So that is the layman language, right? So it says section 69 says 69(1) says in case of the individual and in case of the partnership, in case of the trust, in case of the company, how to determine the residential estate. So in our discussion, we discussed residential estate of the individual as well as in the residential estate of corporate company, basically, right? My discussion is focused on that. So individual residential determine it says section 69 says he reside in Sri Lanka, they are resident of Sri Lanka tax. The second point is very important for this discussion. The second point says if the particular individual physically present in Sri Lanka for a period during the commence of A within a year of assessment, he shall be treated as resident individual for Sri Lanka. That is right. So how we recognize how many days he physically Lanka, right? That person for any 12 months period, 12 months period, right? Any 12 months period. If he physically present in Sri Lanka, that particular individual shall be considered as resident individual for Sri Lanka. Right? So we are not bothering about whether he has permanent residency, whether he has whether he is coming for the tourist visa, whether he is coming for the business visa. No, this is not important. Tax law says physical presence is important. With that particular individual, he physical presence in Sri Lanka more than 103 days, 103 days or more within any 12-month period. Any 12-month period. There are no end within a year of months. That as resident individual for Sri Lanka. That is coupled with the section 70 as well. Right? It says the period starting, the 12-month period is starting from not he become resident for Sri Lanka. Right? So that is very important. That is the important point. Status of a non-resident person, because we know that thereafter once he becomes because if he stay in Sri Lanka more than 100 days, he is resident. Therefore, we are not bothering about whether he is having an income in Sri Lanka or not. Right? So the section 69 1B, that is the most critical section. So our year of assessment starts with 1st April 2025. 24, ending with 31st 2025. So, what is the period? It says start to end during the year. Right? 12-month period could be start from here, and also it could be ended. I mean, ended this day. The 12-month period has been So assuming he came to Sri Lanka first June 2002, right? 12-month period. Go beyond our year of passport. You can see beyond our year of passport. But that 12-month period is the period we need to consider. Right? So within that 12-month period, his physical consumption in Sri Lanka, 150 or more, he has to be treated as resident individual for Sri Lanka income tax purpose. Right? For this period. For this period. Before that, he is not resident. So remember, so within one particular year of passport, first person could be individual, could be resident as well as non-resident. Non-resident. Right? Clear? That is, this is actually the total difference from the previous MSO what we have in Sri Lanka. Before 2018. This is in line with international law right now. Right? Today we will try to discuss the double tax avoidance agreement. And the agreement also says this type of definition for the residential estate. Right? Right. So this is a very important definition. Individual. Individual. Right? So other things are so the person reside means he is we go visit to outside Sri Lanka or for the business purpose outside Sri Lanka, whatever thing, but he habitually was the interest are in Sri Lanka. In such case, it can be resident right? So other cases, government employee and official person who is working in Sri Lanka, individual who is working in Sri Lanka, employee in Sri Lanka, keep it's like registered Sri Lanka Merchant Shipping Act. That particular individual also treated as resident individual for Sri Lanka, right? So I mean, but this is little tricky point. And the company system, you remember, if it is incorporated under the law in Sri Lanka, it shall be treated as definitely resident company for Sri Lanka. The company arrangement is shift current back. Registered office or principal office. If we are going for incorporation, we have to give definitely registered office. I think you know that Form 1, which shows where you are registered office. Form 1. They have to give. Whereas in the other case, they are giving a representative office. Right? And thereafter say, other point it says, if the effective management, where the effective management is happened. Right? And then that point is important. We need to find out where the particular company is incorporated. If it is not incorporated in Sri Lanka, then obviously it's a non-resident company. Having said that, it says if they are effective management considered as a resident company for Sri Lanka, that means they have incorporated somewhere else, but vital interest is in Sri Lanka. They are doing business in Sri Lanka. Everything is in Sri Lanka. Only registration is outside. Right? But it's very tricky point. I mean, it's a very arguable point. If it is incorporated in any other country, then it is Sri Lanka tax. Right? Right. That is the residential status. So now, first thing, about tax liability or determine the tax liability of the person. First thing we have to determine whether he is a resident or not. Resident or not resident. Thereafter, if he We determine he is a resident person, so we need not to worry about where that income is generated. If we become whether there is a source in Sri Lanka to that particular person, right? So then it is important. What is right? We discuss artificial grants of income should be generated from Sri Lanka in case of the non-resident person. Income should be generated from Sri Lanka. Right? So how we determine the income generated from Sri Lanka? Source in Sri Lanka. So that is important. So it's the section 72 and 73. 72 says there are two broad categories of amount that may be included in calculating income as having a source in Sri Lanka. 72(1) says those amount related to a realization of disposal of domestic assets and assistant liability signs. Realize the broad category, other type of payment that has a source in Sri Lanka. So realization of disposal of domestic assets and liabilities specifically comprise the following: consideration within the domestic trading stock of capital asset, capital assets, capital assets and liability of business, investment assets. Right. Emotionally included on realization of depreciation assets. Other type of payment with the source in Sri Lanka. Section 12 into one. Exhaustive list under section 76. The exhaustive list. The basic list says 72 says there is an asset, domestic assets and liability. There is a realization that shall be treated as a source in Sri Lanka. The exhaustive list is given in the section 73. Right? It says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Evidently, it shall be considered source. Right? Clear? So, the category of income discourse is said in case of the employment income. In case of the employment income, it says payment received in respect of employment. Payment received in respect of employment. To the extent derived in respect of employment exercised in Sri Lanka. Employment is exercised in Sri Lanka. Where the employee is there. Where he is discharging his duty. If it is in Sri Lanka, employment is treated as exercise in Sri Lanka. Regardless of where they are paid. They are not bothering about where the payment is coming. If that particular employee, with regard to which type of employee they are talking, non-resident employee. Because non-resident is whether there is a source in Sri Lanka. In resident employee, plus one. Right? So non-resident employee, whether that particular are discharging their duty in Sri Lanka, they shall be treated as there is a source in Sri Lanka. We are not bothering about where the payment is coming. Payment should be coming from outside Sri Lanka. Right? That is the meaning. You can see the danger. right? So we like that with that double tax evidence agreement as well. So we'll discuss later. So for the time being, we'll first understand what is source in Sri Lanka means, right? So in the government of Sri Lanka, where the payment is done? Government of Sri Lanka, it paid on O, it paid by O on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, regardless of where. In that context, where the employment is excised. If the payment made by Sri Lanka government, then it shall be returned as a source in Sri Lanka. Or on behalf of Sri Lanka government. Right? If the payment made by Sri Lanka government, it shall be returned as a source in Sri Lanka. In case of the company also, to the extent derived from a company resident and conducted business in Sri Lanka. If the resident company in Sri Lanka, that's resident company making a payment in respect of employment, and the resident company is exercising business in Sri Lanka, then it shall be returned as a source in Sri Lanka. Is that clear? So, but there are some exemptions from the employment income. I believe that you learned this thing. So, the income of individual entitled privilege under the diplomatic should be taken from that. Right? No tax liability is there. So, it can develop much plan and then people they are working in Sri Lanka. So now they are exercise employment in Sri Lanka on behalf of Indonesia, not for Sri Lanka. Coming from outside Sri Lanka, sometimes the payment that payment goes to their account in their country where they resident. The exercise in Sri Lanka. Source in Sri Lanka. That's why it says diplomatic person who is covering under diplomatic immunities law that they are entitled for tax exemption. Right? Dividend paid by resident company. If the dividend paid by the resident company shall be returned, there is a source in Sri Lanka. Right? Now, shareholder could pay outside Sri Lanka. The resident company declaring dividend. Now, it shall be realized that resident person has a source in Sri Lanka. Right? Point is, if the dividend is declared by resident company, dividend declared by resident company, there is a source in Sri Lanka. Interest charges annuity called technical service fee. So you can see service fee payment. Interest charges annuity called technical service. So if the payment or similar payment, whatever service fee, just like that, or similar payment paid by a resident person. If that payment is made by a resident person, it means that that's a source in Sri Lanka. What type of thing? Interest, charges, annuities, royalty, technical service fees, or similar payments. If the payment is made by a resident person in Sri Lanka, then it shall be derived as a source in Sri Lanka. But it says, however, this is not, except where it is an expense for business carried on through a permanent establishment outside Sri Lanka. Right? So it says, now it says, resident person make that payment. Now again to non-resident person, right? It should be non-resident person. That's a resident person. He makes a service fee payment outside Sri Lanka. Now it shall be derived as a source in Sri Lanka. Right? But if that person makes that payment on behalf of permanent establishment outside Sri Lanka, that means there may be another permanent establishment for the time being. I will explain that they also I explain permanent establishment means there is a permanent business location outside Sri Lanka. Permanent business location outside Sri Lanka. That's called permanent establishment. Right? So, any permanent establishment outside Sri Lanka, on behalf of that, on behalf of this, he is making this payment to another person, another non-resident. He shall not be declared as a source in Sri Lanka. It goes like this. He is non-resident person. Assume he is a non-resident person. He work for business location outside Sri Lanka. And business location outside Sri Lanka. So, this person needs to make the payment to this party. Right? On behalf of this permanent business location, Sri Lanka resident person make the payment to this non-resident. Obviously, that because first part is says interest charge this type of payment if the payment is made by resident person. We are not bothering about whether we consume payment service or not. Low again is in payment the payment is made by a resident person to another party. It shall be considered as a source in Sri Lanka. It doesn't say that particular employee or the person or the employee, whatever, whoever, render a service to Sri Lanka. Then law again, that is the danger of law. Law says if the payment is made by a resident person, it shall be treated as a source in Sri Lanka. You can see in this context, we didn't consider many services. So that particular resident person didn't make any service to Sri Lanka. He made a service to another country. Yeah, this person's permanent establishment or somewhere permanent establishment outside Sri Lanka, right? But Sri Lanka resident person make that payment. In such case, it says it is not. There is no solution in Sri Lanka to this part. That's the meaning of that. Is that clear? So ideally, let's say non-resident person, if he is liable for Sri Lanka income tax, he should get income under that category, source of income we discussed, right? Income from Sri Lanka. Otherwise, he shall not be liable for Sri Lanka tax. Method source of Sri Lanka, source in Sri Lanka means if the payment is made by a resident person, it shall be considered there shall be a source in Sri Lanka. But in this country, there is no really source in Sri Lanka. Only payment is processed from Sri Lanka. It's a settlement arrangement. Right. So interest charge and priority technical service or similar payment paid by a resident person, except whether it is an expense of a business carried on through a permanent establishment outside Sri Lanka. So same thing. So this part I want to highlight. This is the part what we have discussed. So interest charges, annuities, royalty, technical service fee, or similar payment paid by a non-resident person as an expense for business carried on through a permanent establishment Sri Lanka. So in this context, non-resident person in Sri Lanka, he has a permanent business location. So as expenses he made a payment, that is also treated as that's a source in Sri Lanka. So this is two things, right? First thing I told you that is very clear. This is regarding non-resident. This type of. He shall be a non-resident person. He has a business location in Sri Lanka. He called permanent establishment. As expenses of this business location, he made a payment to non-resident. then it shall be treated as a source of trade. Obviously, this non-resident person. So, person 1 still he just has a business location in Sri Lanka, still he is a non-resident person. He is making a payment to non-resident person 2. So, this person has a source in Sri Lanka. That's the meaning. Right? Shall we read again? Interest, charges, and fees, royalties, payment service fee, or similar payment paid by a non-resident person. Non-resident person. As an expense of the business carried on through. He is non-resident person. There is a business carried in Sri Lanka through a permanent establishment. To another non-resident person. Then it shall be realized that the source in. So interest, charges, and royalty remittances. So similar payment paid by the government of Sri Lanka, including such payment made by any institution or on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka. So if the payment is made by Sri Lanka government, it's also as a just source in Sri Lanka. So winning from lottery, betting or gambling, led to game of chance held in Sri Lanka. Game of chance is happening in Sri Lanka. In such case, we shall recognize that there's a source in Sri Lanka. Right? Example, I could say non-resident person who online buy, say, national development lottery. He won the first prize. That lottery draw is happening in Sri Lanka. Then it can be recognized as a source in Sri Lanka. Game of chance is held in Sri Lanka. Natural resource payment made in respect of or calculated by reference to natural resource taken from land or sea is situated in Sri Lanka. Payment for the natural resources, it is extracted from Sri Lanka. Right? The natural resources is situated in Sri Lanka. So therefore Sri Lanka territory කියන එක definition එක පානවා. Definition එක කියනවා ශ්‍රී ලංකාව මොකක්ද කියලා. Right? APA වල කියනවා ගොඩක් ඒවා. Land and sea place. ඒකේ මොන හරි if he is supposed to make a payment, so it shall be treated as there is a source in Sri Lanka. So rent paid or use from Lanka, it shall be the source. Example, like you said, foreigner can buy a apartment. I mean, to another person, rent is paid by the tenant to directly to foreigner. So foreigner we can categorize, we can recognize non-resident person, so Sri Lanka. Therefore, that he has assets in Sri Lanka. Our right to use assets for payment for that one. That shall be determined as a source in Sri Lanka. Assets in Sri Lanka. Right? In case of insurance, if the risk is in Sri Lanka, risk covered by Sri Lanka, insurance of any risk in Sri Lanka, then it shall be given as a source in Sri Lanka. This is in this way, right? So I mean, we can make an insurance arrangement with the outside Sri Lanka, insurance company outside Sri Lanka. Say our inventory, we can say that in the reinsurance and all those things. We give that all these insurance they are having the reinsurance in big company, which is outside Sri Lanka. So now this case in Sri Lanka, if that service fee payment was for that part purpose, so then it shall be regarded as a source in Sri Lanka. Clear? So in case of the shipping business, this is shipping. Passengers assets that are embarked in Sri Lanka. I mean, they are coming to ship is in the water, right? They come to Sri Lanka and big people loading and unloading goods, they shall be there, source of Sri Lanka. Because shipping company can it's company incorporated outside Sri Lanka. It's a London company. Again, Lanka Lanka, I mean, say in case of let's say you know that Emirates again. And likewise, we can get a ship, Lanka ship, and always that ships are having company ships. So they are coming to Sri Lanka and they are unloading and loading. It shall be there is a payment to that shipping company or shipping line and shall be there as a source in Sri Lanka. They are doing business in Sri Lanka. Non-resident. Well, they are shall be there as a source in Sri Lanka. Payment received by a person who conducted relevant transport business in respect of carriage of passengers to embark or cargo, mail or other movable tangible assets that are embarked in Sri Lanka, other than as a result of transit. Transit, so if they are coming to Sri Lanka, that one ship came, say ship A, and another ship B also came. Between the ships, they are transiting goods. Goods not come into Sri Lanka. Transshipment is a payment mentioned. You can see that somebody, I mean, say, in case of the non-resident, he should do some sort of activity. Relevant transport business, rental of plants, container and related equipment, supplementary carriage referred to above. Means a business of land, sea or yard transport operator, charter, passenger, cargo, mail, other movable tangible. In case of the shipping line and what is this, especially in airlines, there is a way to work out income tax liability. It's not the way where we work out. Because airline Lanka, therefore, we need to check how much income they generate from Sri Lanka. Because the proportionate amount of international or the total, they are restricted. We work out, get the airline work out. Payment is by a person in conducting transmission messages. That means person is doing transmission messages by cable, radio, optical fiber, satellite, or electronic communication with respect to the transmission of message by operator established in Sri Lanka. The operator is established in Sri Lanka. They are doing the transmission message business, telecommunication business. They are transmission or they put up in Sri Lanka. Right? Say another person, they can have equipment in Sri Lanka. They are that message. Pass through the message to this one. Shall be done as source into right. So there is a payment on Sri Lanka in place of excise. So that just like the employment what we discussed. Services rendered for any other service. And in case of the government, payment and government can is as a source in Sri Lanka. I mean to say any other service. But so not cover on the previous. Then the service is rendered in Sri Lanka, so that thing is getting any income. So it shall be prepared as a source in Sri Lanka. In case of the government services, if the payment is made by Sri Lanka government, then it shall be prepared as a source in Sri Lanka. Life insurance, retirement payments, and pension payment not falling within the employment income paid by a resident person. Other expenditure business capital business through permanent outside Sri Lanka, say non-resident person expenditure on the permanent establishment in case of the government. So that time of it shall be realized that there is a source in Sri Lanka. Give and other extra payment to the extent received in respect of business or investment conducted with domestic assets. Right? Domestic assets as in Sri Lanka. So now you know what is source in Sri Lanka. Right? Source in Sri Lanka. Basically what it is. So you can understand. Basically, there are two types of things they discuss. One thing is asset-based rate. Other thing is service-based rate. Either way, right discuss terms. I think again. Asset-based means would be building land or whatever the domestic asset. In relation to that one, asset is in Sri Lanka and payment from that utilization of asset or whatever thing shall be derived as a source in Sri Lanka. Second thing is if the service is exercised in Sri Lanka, then it's for that purpose, then get payment is received, it shall be derived as a source in Sri Lanka. Right? So asset include tangible and intangible assets. Currency could be know-how, property, or right to income or future income or benefit longer than 12 months and a part of an asset. Domestic asset means an asset owned by a resident person. Domestic asset. Other than foreign land or building or an asset held by a foreign permanent establishment of the persons or held by a Sri Lanka permanent establishment. An interest in land or building situated in Sri Lanka and shares in a resident company and membership interest in a body if more than 50% of the value of the interest is derived directly or indirectly through one or more interposed bodies from land or building in Sri Lanka. So that can be derived as domestic asset. Right. So application of withholding tax. Right? This is the main part. So in this case, it says payment made to non-resident persons that are subject to withholding tax other than payment derived to a Sri Lanka permanent establishment. Right? If we are making payment to non-resident, it is subject to withholding tax. Subject to withholding tax. Under withholding tax, we discuss outward remuneration and application of withholding tax. Payment goes outside Sri Lanka. Right? So it says payment made to non-resident persons that are subject to withholding tax. Right? Other than payment derived to a Sri Lanka permanent establishment. So in that non-resident person has a business location in Sri Lanka, it may not be liable for withholding tax. That is the meaning. Right? You can remember, I mean, the recall that knowledge what we discussed regarding how to discharge that tax liability. It could be by way of withholding. The non-resident can pay their tax by way of withholding. They need not to open a tax file in Sri Lanka. So whereas in the if we are making a self-assessment payment, we need to open a tax file in Sri Lanka. Say non-resident person who come to Sri Lanka for say only for one transaction. So they are getting income. Then and there they have to come because what we discussed in the charging section, if they have income in Sri Lanka, they have to pay tax. So in Sri Lanka. So the way is to discharge tax is withholding. So when the payer make a payment, he has to deduct tax. Right? He has to deduct tax. So it goes as withholding tax. So in case of the non-resident person, if he is not doing business in Sri Lanka, within Sri Lanka through a fixed business location, that payment shall be treated as subject to withholding tax and it is finally withholding. Right? Section 88 it says finally withholding other than the payment is derived from Sri Lanka permanent establishment and DTA can be invested. So it says it is finally withholding because once he deducts tax, after he may not come to Sri Lanka. Or even he can render service from outside Sri Lanka to Sri Lanka. Person in Sri Lanka. The only point what we can collect that tax is at the time of payment. Right? Lanka will make Lanka will take payment tax now. He is rendering service from India to Sri Lanka. Right? So මෙයා මෙතනින් සල්ලි ගෙවනවාද මෙයාත් එක්ක අපේ හිත සම්බන්ධයක් නැහැ. So we cannot catch that part for tax purpose. Triggering point. Tax. It is the responsibility of the person who makes the payment to collect tax. The withholding mechanism is effectively using for this type of thing. Once he deducts this tax, it will finally withholding to non-resident. You pay whatever percentage and take that money. Pay. Clear? Then one charges section take up will go and color but we discuss. Right. So now you can find out story. You get the payment made to non-resident person at the point of making payment. At the point of making payment, the resident person who makes the payment has to deduct tax. This control mechanism if you are processing any payment outside Sri Lanka, Commissioner General has given instructions to all the banks, to central bank. The bank should obtain a tax clearance certificate from the Commissioner General. Otherwise, bank will not remit any money outside Sri Lanka. That is the mechanism. So the practically how it's happening. If I want to make a payment outside Sri Lanka, you have to make process the payment through designated foreign currency. So therefore, it should be through bank. Bank commission instruction. You cannot process payment outside Sri Lanka without Commissioner General's tax clearance certificate. We call tax clearance certificate. Credit card payment capture with Nata. Information and credit card pay. Because it says these things, it is necessary to obtain tax clearance. Sorry, this also render service to Sri Lanka. He is not visiting Sri Lanka. Can be done through that platform, whatever thing. He made service to Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka. So this is the Galle application. Now it is part of law. You can see every licensed commercial bank and authorized dealer engage in outward remittance and withholding agent who makes outward remittance shall comply with the following procedures. Licensed commercial bank, financial institution, who any person who make any outward remittance shall comply. Right? It is a law. It says person to be compliant with these procedures, section 83A, 84, 84A, 85. We have discussed, right? So of the Inland Revenue Act, an amendment withholding agent says withholding agent to who make payment to person outside Sri Lanka, who make payment outside Sri Lanka. And all licensed commercial bank and authorized dealers engaged in outward remittance shall comply with these procedures. Government institution under the government of Sri Lanka shall also be compliant with these procedures in the case of a payment made to a non-resident person other than a payment derived to a Sri Lanka permanent establishment. This is invalid law. Right? Requirement of tax clearance. Due withholding tax. WST. It includes the advance income tax imposed in the terms of section listing 84, 83, 84, and 85. That is the only there are all three sections the apply for the withholding tax to a non-resident person shall be collected by the Commissioner General of Inland Revenue. Hereafter referred as CGIR as issuer tax clearance certificate (TCC) for the purpose of relevant outward entrance to a withholding agent. However, TCC is not required in relation to the outward remittance mentioned in the negative list. The some are not required. Negative list. Right? These are. So in case of imports of goods. So we need to make a payment. You remember when we discussed, there was no, the other section 73 is not recognized as there's a source in Sri Lanka. Only service. If we are making for the payment of goods, then it doesn't consider as a source to Sri Lanka asset. No tax clearance also required. Likewise, payment of sales procedures quota charge. Remittance of dividend to shareholders. In such division is subject to advance income tax at the 15%. Now due tax has been already paid. So there is no requirement of tax clearance. If this is for opening an outward investment account, that is for investment we are making outside Sri Lanka. Rental of payment received by a non-resident person who conducts a relevant transport business in respect of carriage of passengers to that type of thing is not required. Right? Pension payment remittance received from government of Sri Lanka from government department. So we are making that payment because on behalf of government, if we are making payment point is important. Say retirement payment, pension means retired government retired employee. If the government makes the payment to say that retired employee is non-resident, then there is a source in Sri Lanka, right? But it's not necessary to apply yet tax clearance certificate. Obviously, under this negative list, so why it is coming in negative list? It is not subject to tax base. That's why it's coming under negative. Export company registration, trademark, annual subscription. If you are making just like say, if I am making my say CPA membership payment. That's right. For the CIM membership payment, it's not required. We can make course fees, exam fees, enrollment fees, living expenses and payment. So I mean to say, if your parents sending their money, money to student who are doing studies outside Sri Lanka, so no source in Sri Lanka, right? But tax clearance are done on it. So likewise, on the negative list, these things are not necessary, right? You can read that. Right? So we need to complete the application and submit to the tax authority. We need to give that in it be submit. What same payment with that we have to have that clearance certificate required, otherwise not. So applicable rate will be decided based on the provision of the IR Irregular Act as mentioned, but subject to the provision of the respective deferred tax evidence annually. And Irregular Act again rate के मदद दिए. And remember Irregular Act rate के दाम क्या है? Schedule वाले के दिन rate के मदद दिए. Rate के दाम है देखिए यार. क्या नहीं tax के नहीं किए. Right? ये mana था? Double tax evidence agreement rate है ना ये use करना. Right? The person who makes the remittance shall pay the withholding tax. Person who remit the payment. Yeah, the withholding tax given. So withholding tax given. We learn that what is mean by withholding tax when we are making the payment, we deduct tax and make the payment. Right? Yeah, the responsibility. The person wants to remit the total amount of any invoice. Should be deducted as the net amount and relevant withholding tax should be calculated amount. The person is required to apply the currency rate, selling rate, published in the website of the CBSL on the date of remittance to convert that. Federal Bank exchange rate is also shown. For the tax point of view, we have central bank selling rate. Selling rate again, rate again go equal. Adu kada adi equal. Rate again bank rate adi aap dena ka. Abhi LKR दी लाइक बैंक में करने का सेलिब्रेट. The parity का तीन है. Right. The parity rate है ना करने का tax on. Returns obviously should be paid to this, and only the balance amount is allowed to be remitted after the payment. Tax එක ගෙවුවට පස්සේ තුරු ටික තමයි යවන්න පුළුවන්. Licensed commercial bank එක කියනවා. Licensed commercial bank and authorized dealer are not required to seek a tax clearance certificate for person who make the outward revenue deferred payment mentioned in negative list. Negative list එකේ තියෙන licensed commercial bank එක කියනවා ඒක ඕනේ. tax clearance එකක් කියලා නෝ. Negative list example say I told you that payment for the goods import or children's certificate. So tax clearance also we can make that payment. Negative list. However, required information shall be collected to provide the information to the subject to answer. Information यहाँ collect करना होगा ना. You are making pay करा. That information should be remitted to or share with the commission general. Education fee කියලා වෙනවා කියවන්න බෑ. ළමන්ගේ education expenses කියලා සල්ලි යවන්න බෑ. Otherwise, Lanka they apply on plan or only it has to be shared the commission general. That's not correct the due so that the agent in any circumstance. Bank what about tax collector? Now we can run a simple example. So if I am making a service related payment to say I am going to make that payment to Hong Kong. So as per the IR here, return rate is 14%. That's the highest rate. Bank would get okay, oya may the no bank cannot do that. Because why? It should be regulated. Right? So detail reconciliation documents share කරන්න. ඒ දින යා details දෙන්න දීලා ඒක ලයිසන් කමර්ෂල් බැංක් එකකට දෙන්න ඕනේ දෙයක්. මේක තමයි clearance application. Right? Details of remitter හම්බ වෙන එක නා. ඊට පස්සේ nature of remitter මොකද්ද payment එක nature of payment invoice number invoice කියනවා total invoice value ඒ invoice value එක අපි දැන් කීයක්ද යවන්නේ මොන currency එකේද invoice එක right ඊට පස්සේ මේ tax එක අපි අඩු කරලා ගෙවනවා net amount එක යවන්න that means say 100 rupees we are deducting tax and balancing we are remitting. So tax amount එක currency rate එක අපි අරගෙන එදා rate එක අරගෙන දානවා. And අපි total invoice value එක යවනවා නම් මේක apply කරනවා. ඒකම කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right? That's the application. මේකත් එක දැම්මම they are giving a direction first. Direction is says what is the rate that needs to be applied. කතාරන්න නැහැ. ඉතල දෙනවා. Mari kan මේ පන්ති ඒක කරන්න බෑ. තරහේ තෝරන්න. තෝරා පන්ති දෙක තමයි ගේම් කරා. අපිට එලෙවල් වලට ගන්නකො කොහොම කරාද හරි ඉන්නවා. ආදා කිනාවෙන්. එලසක් කිව්වා. පහුගේ පහතර අපි දීලා දෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපේ පන්ති පොඩ්ඩ දාන්න එකක් ගන්න හදන්න. අපි 14 කරා. 12 අනිලට 14 අනිලට පහෙන් එක 12 අනිලට පේන එක ඊළඟ වෙන එක ඉතින් ඒක 14 ඉතින් ඉතෝල දෙන්න බෝඩ් එකේ අනික නවන්නකට අපි හරි ආසයි. මොන දෙයකද මේ අතපාර තෝරන්නේ මම හිතාගෙන යන විසාර තම දවසින් කියලා කිව්වා. එයා කොහොම කරනවද අදලෝ දාන්න ස්ටඩි එක බදීනේ හැම එකනා කරලා තුලස්සයි. තර්කිනකොට දානවා. ඔයා මේකක් තියෙනවා. ඔයා මේකක් තියෙනවා. මේ කියලා හිතා. විසාර ටික ගන්න දැන් කලින් සුණත් බලන්න විභාගේ ඊට දවස් දෙයක් උදේ ඇහිලා දෙනවා. මේක සෙන්ටර් එක ආවා. ඒක අයිෆෝන් වලදී ස්කෝර් හොදලා මේ ගන්නවා. එයා දෙනවා ප්‍රයිස් එක උඩ. යා පේපර් එක සෙට් කරලා දෙනවා නෙගටිව් මාර්ක් දෙන්න. වැඩි උත්තර ලියුවොත් නෙගටිව් මාර්ක්. ඒක වැඩිම ගත්ත එක්කට දෙනවා ටැග්. උදාහරණ දෙනවා සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් රිපෝට් එක හරි සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් ඉෂු කරා මැගසින් එක සටහන. ඉකොනොමික් ආනන්ද ශ්‍රී ලංකා ඉකොනොමික්. අන්න එකක් දෙන්න. මම දෙන්නේ මොනවද? හරි. මේ කතා කරන්න බෑ. Right, so this is very practically. I mean, if you are in a company working for a company, you need to make payment outside Sri Lanka. Definitely, this clearance position need to be followed. ඔගොල්ලෝ කරා දාන්න දැන් මම දැන් මේ කියපු දේ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැන් හොඳට තේරෙන්නේ නැති. So අපි ඊළඟ පාඩම ඊළඟ කතා කරලා පස්සේ තේරෙනවා යාට. The points where you can challenge because the tax authority side always they try to collect the tax. Sometimes that particular payment is not subject to tax. You can see that on the negative list. Let's say if you are making a payment to outside Sri Lanka to register a trademark as an exporter, it's not required. Right? Clearance certificate is not required. So, a samahara payment so that I told you that direction is issued. Direction again, first thing is they are issuing direction. That's what it says. Invoice application they are the one officer is checking the verifying the documents with details and the relevant provisions. And he determined whether it is liable for tax or not. And thereafter he is telling that okay, this payment is subject to tax and the rate. If it is not subject to tax, he is giving this payment is not subject to tax in Sri Lanka. That is direction. So we call no tax clearance. No tax deduction we can provide to bank. Okay, there is no requirement of the tax clearance for this. So here the direction with the direction, the relevant tax need to be paid. And with the slip we have to give that back to the tax authority. They are after they are issuing a tax clearance. When the tax clearance may invoice the amount of Lanka tax so bank can send this money to them. That is the tax clearance certificate. The two steps. First thing is we have to get that whether that payment is subject to tax and on which trade. Second thing, we have to make the payment and apply for the change. Now this is we can do we can make and send an email with the relevant bank contact email. So they are directly send that clearance to bank. Banking that's how that clearance process is happening. Practically, how it happens, that's the direction. Right? Samara payments on this is practical thing. Exam test right? So we call blanket clearance. Blanket clearance means we are making series of payment. The May month payment remittance clearance ये पार करता है इखाने में पार हम पेमेंट एक दिन because they are verifying whether अभी एक पार की invoice आती है तो अभी एक tax नहीं सीधा 10,000 के अपने क्या मतलब बैंक को नहीं मेका 10,000 no it's not the way invoice wise we have to obtain but if there is a series of payments say every month we are making the payment in such case we can apply for a blanket clearance they are giving this type of payment a payment category we can remit for a period. Right? So it's a blanket. Especially for tax clearance, second story international payment and clearance division. Right? In my company, there's a designated separate person to get that clear. The market we are now international entities, right? We are working for a company, some the transaction outside Sri Lanka. If that clearance is required, that knowledge is very important. Right? Right. That is clearance, right? Requirement. So that's what we discussed. So unless that payment is closed as Sri Lanka permanent establishment, so that claim procedure we need to follow. But payment made non-resident person that are subject to its other than payment derived to Sri Lanka permanent establishment. If that non-resident person has a permanent business location in Sri Lanka, then that is not a final withholding tax. right? That means that non-resident person has a location in Sri Lanka. Right? That is not final withholding. That means final withholding is final withholding is different safer. The final withholding we cannot get it. And final withholding we can get the tax credit. Right? So as I mentioned to you, permanent business location, there is a location in Sri Lanka. The non-resident person, he has a location in Sri Lanka. So we locate income, we have to account, we have to pay tax. Example, I can say, so you know that HSBC Bank, they have a branch office in Sri Lanka. HSBC, they have a branch office in Sri Lanka. That branch office means HSBC is a resident company for Sri Lanka tax. HSBC is a resident company in Lanka. Nah, they are incorporated in Sri Lanka. So, principal office in Sri Lanka. Their decision is not taken in Sri Lanka. Also happening outside Sri Lanka. Still that HSBC is a non-resident person for Sri Lanka tax. So they do business in Sri Lanka. Through which business location? What is it? Branch of business in Sri Lanka. They have no profit and doing a years to pay tax. Not establishment account from the non-resident person. That particular business activity profit we have to and tax exempt. Again, a permanent business location where we need to work out the tax liability. Any withholding tax paid, payment, he can get tax credit. That's why it's not the final withholding. Whereas if somebody is not having a permanent establishment in Sri Lanka, then it should be final withholding. Right? What are you getting? What are you getting? ඒක ඇහුණා. ඒක වෙලාවක අපේ කතා කරන විදිහ දෙන්නද මම බලන්නේ. කාලේ. මට ගියා. ට්‍රිප් එක කියලා මොනවද ගියා? තේරුන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක කොහොමද? Yeah.